Hello, my name's Duncan, and today we're interviewing Coach Idland. How's it going, Coach?
It's going great. Thanks for sitting down with me. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for sitting with us. You started off the season great already. You're 8-0-1, one tie. That's very impressive. How do you feel so far?
It's hard to feel anything but good about the group. You know, they're doing great work every day, and the results are showing. And I'm proud of the work they're doing.
This season has been going off great. How do you hope to continue that going into the second half of the season? Where do you think you sort of need to continuously stay strong on, and where do you think improvements can be made?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest strength right now that stands out of the program is sort of how stingy we are defensively, and that kind of comes from being persistent play by play and making sure you're breaking up the other team's attack. And so obviously we have to continue to do that work and be disciplined about it. I think we have some room to improve in front of the other goal, to be honest, and become a little bit more efficient and have just a little bit more killer instinct there. We're on track, but some room to grow there.
Your team also has been doing great defensively. What do you think is the biggest strength that has allowed that to happen? Is it your goalie, or is it how your defense is able to break up their passing ability?
Yeah, I think that one is almost a little bit counterintuitive. So you'd almost think that it's going to come down to goalkeeping and the defenders, and they obviously play a very big part in it. It's very, very much a team effort, and it happens in every part of the field. And we've been sharp in our own end when we've needed to, which is important. Just as much higher up the field, closer to the opponent's goal. We have done a pretty good job, every game of preventing the other team from getting any kind of real rhythm on the ball and creating too many dangerous chances. And so that all kind of adds up to keeping it out of your own net.
And that's very impressive. And would you say there's a key player who's really been able to do that, or is it team symmetry up front that's very able to good? They're very good at communication with each other.
Yeah, no, it's very much a team thing. I mean, we lean on essentially our full roster. If you kind of go through game by game, it looks a little bit different every game. Many games we're able to involve most, if not even on occasion, all of the team in these games. So it's absolutely a team effort there, and I wouldn't really point to a single player.
Especially this year, you've been very big on recruiting this year. You have a much bigger team than in previous years. Would you say that has helped give your team a lot more stamina as you can put in more players, or is it pretty consistent and the team is just there to support and really help and really make sure that everyone's ready to go?
Yeah, no, it's good to have depth, right? And so we have plenty of that. I think what it has allowed us to do, which has been nice, is play the game as fast as we can possibly play it, and try to put the opponents under the most intense pressure as we can. And obviously that, fatigue comes in to play there, and it's a fit group, but to be able to rotate additional players in when you're kind of playing at full intensity is a big advantage. And there's no drop off, it's just a continuation of that sort of intensity, and that has kind of worked in our favor several of these games.
So the team you did tie to this year was a team you reportedly lost to last year. How'd you sort of go into that game sort of scheming it out? Did you have a set idea of how you're going to play, or did you change it up mid-game?
No, I mean, we've had, like you said, we've had some experience with them in the previous year. There were some, as you go back and look at that video, there are some patterns in there that you try to sort of plan for and be prepared to adapt if they sort of leave their game script. But it looked about as was expected there. I don't know, we played it with a second holding midfielder that game, which was, it's the only match so far this year that we've done that. That seemed to be effective. We sort of rode that throughout the game, but it was a good result for us. I told the team there are, good ties and bad ties, and that was definitely a good one.
And clearly, because your team continued on winning afterwards, so you stayed strong, you stayed consistent. Would you say relying on one person to score, or multiple people that all sort of are on the upfront shooters who are really good at consistently getting open and allowing their other teammates to score as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's also very much a shared effort there. We have lots of different contributors. one game it's one player, one game it's another. I think that's nice because it's I would imagine a little bit difficult to plan against. If you sort of really zero in on one of those attacking players up front, probably one or two of the others in that front line will eventually get you, I hope. But so far so good with that side of things too.
Speaking of players, one thing you do this every time after a game, you have a little tradition where you give off a hammer to one of the players. Where did that sort of begin? What's it sort of symbolize?
Well, it began last year, more or less an organic kind of thing. It's actually just an old kind of Halloween prop that was in my basement. I think one of my kids had it. I brought it and thought it might be a neat thing for the team. Just kind of took on a life of its own, And so that's something that when we win, only when we win, the team kind of decides who gets the hammer that day. And I think it kind of represents who brought it the most that day, or sometimes they tend to give it to somebody who had a special moment, or maybe a game-winning goal, big save, whatever it might be. But it's neat, something we get to look forward to. It's a little perk, a little reward at the end of getting the W.
How do you foster team camaraderie in this group to really stick together and be friends and really be a true team? Do you do anything special?
The biggest thing for me, I'm always talking about with the team is to sort of blend the classes. It's one of my kind of core tenets in the philosophy of managing the team, and that's just to make sure that there aren't any of your typical divisions across classes within a team that sometimes can happen if you don't just put a couple of measures or a couple of systems in place to work across them. None of it is rocket science. It's just whenever opportunities come up within any of the team activities that we can sort of control who works with who, or who sits with whom, or who, we just make sure that we're working across the classes. And you might have a freshman and a senior paired up rather than two freshmen, for example. And that, when you do enough of that, the players make, good, natural, organic connections with each other, and you don't get any of that sort of wait for your turn in line type of a vibe that sometimes can happen with teams. And I think that really helps the chemistry and the camaraderie, and it allows especially young players to be themselves within the group. I think that comes out big time, whether it's, on the field with how they perform, in terms of confidence, or even I think you can see it on the sidelines with, I'm very, very proud of the sideline culture that we have, and it's pretty animated and there's lots of personality in it. Very often that's driven from some of the younger players within the team, which to me is a really good sign that something positive is going on there, that kids that young feel that comfortable to take ownership of that part of the process, and it absolutely contributes to the winning.
That sounds amazing. And one thing I personally see on campus while walking around is the lunches. You all seem to go at the same time. Is that right after practice, or do you all decide we're going to go to lunch at this one time?
Well, I'm not always in on that, so they're they do on their time is up to them. But when we have recruits on campus, it might be one of those occasions where you will see me in there with them, and that's something that we try to do again, just to sort of be basically ambassadors of the program and make sure that the recruits get a good feel of what sort of the social side of the team is like. Where it goes from there outside of when I'm involved, I all that is left to the team. But they're a close group, and it doesn't surprise me if you see them sitting together for a meal. Sure. And
that team camaraderie definitely goes over into the game, and I think that's a great job that you've done and your players have done. And you see that on the sidelines if people ever go to your games. I've been to a few of them, and it's just so much support, so much energy on that sideline. It's always there. It's always loud. When you can hear them all screaming, come back, go forward, great job. It's amazing to see in person. And it's not even just you, but how you've sort of helped them to be like, don't click up, which is a massive problem in sports. You see this in bigger teams like track, football. People stay in their offensive defense and then break up even slightly. I think that's an amazing job what you've done to sort of eliminate that sort of cliquey nature. Do you see that as a problem in some sports?
I can only speak for my own team. I just know that I want the opposite of that for them. So it's tough for me to kind of comment on other sports or other teams, but I'm glad that for my team there's very little of that, if any at all, and we kind of embrace the idea of, like I said, kind of working across any of those tricky divisions that can come up for a team. So
going into this second half of the season, you're about halfway through. And after that, after this normal season, you then have the Empire 8 Championships. Where do you see this team sort of going? Do you think consistently you're going to try to stay this team, or are you going to try to go more aggressive in offense and try to score more points?
We're scoring plenty of goals too. I know everything that's getting the attention is the shutouts at the moment, but we play a really nice balanced style of soccer, and I'm happy with that. And the team sort of evolves as it goes, but it's not as if I look at it and say, okay, we need to change this piece of our game or that piece of our game in order to be competitive to push on and win a championship. Ideally, it's more kind of taking it day by day, doing the jobs diligently, being disciplined, and sort of standing up to the tests as they come. And so far, we've been good in that department. We have some more tough ones coming up here. Without a doubt, that'll start preparing us for the postseason too.
So you say consistency and discipline are your keys to success, rather than aggressiveness or rapidly changing.
Yeah, well, I think aggressive play is part of it, but you certainly have to bring that every day and every play. And there have been spots here and there throughout a couple of games along the way where that has dipped in moments, and we've addressed it as teams. It hasn't cost us a result, thankfully. So behind the scenes, there's that kind of work going on. Like I think there will be for just about any team. It's important for us to know that at the college level, and I'm sure this is true in any sport, but just about anybody can catch you if you don't show up, that day and make you pay for it. Our players understand that. Our team certainly understands that. And so I think we have the right mentality, the right leadership within the group, just be very on top of that. I keep saying the disciplined kind of consistency side of things so that we do bring it, every game and throughout every portion of every game and avoid any of those little traps or pitfalls that can come if you sort of like take your foot off the gas.
One thing that's always a test for teams is traveling. And you've clearly shown that, and your team's clearly shown that you don't have that struggle of going to another team's home field and dominating. Would you say that's a key point in this discipline and we were talking about earlier in consistency?
Yeah, I think so. Learning to play on the road has its own little quirks and nuances. And again, we have good leadership within the team that's pretty experienced and understands, that side of things. So if it involves hotel stay, it's about making sure everybody gets, to bed on time and gets the rest you need, and that you kind of manage to stay within the timing of your pregame routine, even though you have to work in the travel piece of it and checking in and checking out and stuff like that. I think that's so far so good in that regard.
You've talked a bit about your leadership unit today, clearly just right now. Would you say it's more seniors, juniors, and are those like the real people that have been in the system a long time, that have just really been around you and they know the culture you want to develop for this school and this team? What do you say that's a pretty big importance? How much do you think this year has that really affected the freshmen who've come in?
Well, I'd like to think it's affected them positively. I think they see a really good example every day within the captain's ranks or outside of that informally. It's always an adjustment process for young players, freshmen. It's, until you've gone around the full cycle one time, you're kind of literally adjusting every day as you go. I think they have really good kind of touch points to go to in those people, just, either indirectly following their example or directly if they want to, go have a quick chat with them. And, I think that the group has been steered pretty well by the leadership.
Losing those seniors next year, do you think you have the players to really replace that? We see with some teams, they lose their seniors and it's a massive lapse. Do you see that happening with this team, or do you see that this consistency going on to the next year? Yeah,
well, we have good leadership throughout all the different ranks of the team. To be honest, it's certainly not just a senior thing, although, the senior players are important. Don't get me wrong. But I'm confident that we'll keep it rolling. Every edition of the team is a little bit different than the one before, and that's okay. That's a good thing, I think. So the idea is not to try to replicate this year what we did last year, and the idea will not be next year to replicate what we're doing this year. It'll be a slightly different version of ourselves. We'll kind of find what that is. There will always be players to continue to step up, just like there'll be, new younger ones kind of coming in. through the process too, and we'll find our way as that version of ourselves when the time comes.
And these are student athletes. How do you think this sort of camaraderie has helped academically as well, that they have this support base? Do you think that's really helped them be consistent in classes as well?
Yeah, I do. I think that's an important part of the whole thing for us too, is for some of the younger players to have sort of go-to people on the team, especially if they're within the same major or similar majors where they may have similar classes or the same professors teaching maybe a different class or whatever it might be. We've always done a pretty good job with that too. Again, as student athletes come through, and there will always be little challenges, little maybe bumps in the road as you kind of make your way through classes. They have those go-to people within the team that they already have good, positive, strong relationship with, that they can ask about. And hey, I've got this exam coming up. Do you remember how you prepared for it? I have to make a choice between this class or that class, maybe any advice. And that almost always works to the benefit of the younger student athlete. So it's nice to have that support network.
Some sports do study events where they all come together and study together. Do you see that, not maybe you organizing it, but with fellow students, like, hey, we're all in this class or similar classes, let's all get together and study? Have you ever seen any of that in your program?
Well, again, it's similar to the question you asked about the lunches. I mean, that I try to stay out of that side of things a little bit. I don't really mandate any of those type of programs within my group. There are all different ways to manage this thing. But for me, it's very much about, I want soccer to play a part in the student athlete's development toward independence. And so rather than sort of imposing required, study hall times, for example, which can work and absolutely do work for many programs. Instead, I do have a process where I check in on to make sure that they have sort of put together an appropriate study plan for themselves for whatever it is they have coming up, and then ask them to follow their own plan through. And then we sort of keep track on the academic side that way. And so long as that process is moving along smoothly for them, they can sort of handle that on their own once we've gone through one cycle of grades.
And do you think that having a solid academics really helps with soccer as well, not having the stress of classes, school, tests, oh, am I going to pass this year? Do you think that really helps if students have that consistently, okay, we're getting stuff done, helps them in soccer as well, not to worry and have massive stress?
I think that's exactly it, because it allows them to have their mind on the soccer when they're on the field. I always say it's pretty important to have your attention in the present tense. So you don't want it in the past tense if you can help it, and you don't want it in the future if you can help it. You just basically want to be dialed into what am I doing right now on the field. If you're having trouble managing the academic side of things for yourself, undoubtedly your attention's going to be at least partially in both of those areas in the past and in the future, and it gets a little bit tougher to do the soccer well. So yeah, it all kind of complements each other.
Another big component of being a student athlete is the gym, going on the field and going on the gym. How do students manage having so many different aspects? In your opinion, how do you think that has sort of helped have it? Is it a schedule? Is it a fluid schedule, or is it set? These are the times that really help students, or what sort of style do you have?
Yeah, there are set times. Coach Brian, who's a wonderful asset to the athletics department, manages that side of things for us. He has them in there twice a week during the season, Tuesdays and Thursdays at a set time. Once in a rare while, he'll alter it. Like yesterday, he came out to the field to work with them with resistance bands rather than bringing them into the gym. But the team embraces it. It's another aspect of the program that thankfully we have an expert to kind of lead, and he's done a wonderful job. Has kind of become a really important part of our team and our program. You see him on the sidelines, even at our games, getting in on the celebrations. It's wonderful. I love it. And it makes a big difference in the student athletes. You can really see it, in terms of just the strength and power and explosiveness on the field. But I think also the confidence that kind of comes through from feeling that good about the physical side. So I really can't say enough about that side of things. It's been wonderful.
That sort of building that base is what I like to think of working out as. Do you do preseason lifts as well? Do you think starting off the season, working out, like maybe over summer, do you give them anything, or do you have Brian to give them anything? So they come in knowing, let's get some athletic base in before you're immediately thrown into the weed whacker of everything.
Yeah, of course. It would be dangerous not to, and negligent not to. So they have programming throughout, all the different periods of the year that you're supposed to, and it goes through phases. And Brian has taken over all of it as we've gone. So it's sort of been a transition. He's been with the department for 2 years now, and I would manage the cardio side, and we'd have strength and conditioning manage the strength side. And as we've begun working more and more together, he's sort of rolled the cardio side into the into the same platform that he uses to deliver the strength side, and that has been great. And the players have come back even fitter in this cycle than in the previous one, on both sides of strength and conditioning. That plays a big part in being able to kind of hit the ground running, to stay healthy, which knock on wood, we've been relatively healthy so far this season.
And one thing you see a lot of times on the soccer social media, which is soccer's been doing great with going to other teams' games like field hockey. Do you think that's sort of important to help them realize they're not only part of they're not a Brockport soccer team, they're part of Brockport athletics? Do you think that's a big part?
Yeah, I love that whole side of Brockport in general. Anytime we have recruits come through and they can kind of get a taste of it, if there's a game going, it doesn't have to be our game. It could be a game going on with, as you said, one of the other teams. Depends what season we might be in. Could be maybe they're coming in the winter and we go see basketball or hockey or whatever it might be. That's always been, I think, a major upside to Brockport. It really speaks to the school's kind of identity and character, I think, within the student body and the student athletes in general. And yeah, so I think it's a symbiotic thing, so we show up to other teams' games and support them, and we get that same support, and I think everybody appreciates that.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure.